All right, everyone. Elizabeth Warren is going for that far left vote. She's trying to steal some of the thunder, I think, of the others that are somewhat ahead of her. Like, basically, on the left, it's Sanders and Harris battling it out. She's sort of at the Beto O'Rourke or Cory Booker level. You can see these people jostling. Beto's trying to go a little bit more moderate, which, is predictable because the left is so packed. It'd be easier. It'd be easier for him to go up against Biden single-handedly than to deal with all these other people simply because they're going to turn into a mess of cats ripping each other apart. So she's gone to the left, and her thing is now she's talking about wanting to abolish the Electoral College. Now, first, this is spoken of very, very commonly within U.S. politics. In the wake of the last election more than usual, but it's always been sort of a fixture. And the thing is, getting rid of the Electoral College would be a disaster. And some people say, well, they're direct, like Switzerland has democracy. Okay, yeah, Switzerland's kind of a functioning democracy, but it's a limited one, which, you're seeking to remove all limits on government power if you're on the left anyway, so I don't know how well that would work with it. That's number one. Number two, Switzerland is very, very small and economically homogenous. A little bit different from the U.S. We are the main world power, one of the geographically largest countries, one of the most populated countries, with, by the way, huge room for expansion. We'll eventually top 500 million easy. We've got a huge land area and all of these different economic situations. You can't tell me that there can be a federal policy that can be implemented that does not harm one part or another of the country. What the Electoral College does is it forces politicians to go and listen to and at least pretend to care about small town American issues, because there are a lot of states where there aren't really metropolitan areas, like Iowa. Iowa is one of the most important states because of the Iowa caucus. New Hampshire would be the other example. These are two states that are largely rural. They don't have any major metropolitan areas. Des Moines is like, okay, it's a city, but it's not exactly New York City. And so if you were only going by popular vote, why the fuck would you go there? No, you wouldn't bother. You'd be spending your time in Chicago. Politicians would only care about urban areas, specifically on the coasts and in dotting the Great Lakes. They'd talk in those regions, and then they would forget everybody else. And they could easily win on a platform of, hey, I want to take money from the outlands, give them to the cities for civic projects and shit. Yeah, and 60% of the country could be conned into voting for such a thing. The problem is that democracy is inevitably unstable. It can't become stable, because what it does is people just vote themselves more money, or they'll vote themselves more power. Pretty soon it'll cripple itself into an oligarchy, because they'll create so many problems with their mob rule mentality that they'll seek to have a sort of pseudo-meritocratic system come and save them, and that devolves further. Now, I disagree with Plato on one thing. He's talking about cycles of different kinds of government. In a republic, those aren't eliminated. You go through these cycles anyway. It's specifically a timocracy, or we'd call it a meritocracy, where the strong, the wise are leading, devolves into a democracy where it's like decadent and everything goes, recompacts into an oligarchy where it's sort of like a timocracy, but it's people that have taken advantage rather than people that deserved power. And then finally you end up with a tyranny where you have like a dictator or something closely approximating it. That's true, but in a republic you have that, but it's been constrained. You still have the same tendencies. What Plato was looking at was the form of government, not the tendencies behind them. There are other forms that you can have a theocracy or whatever. Democracy is, though, just a form of authoritarianism. It's just that the authority worship goes back into the hands of 51% of the population. Well, that is not a very good idea. No, power in the hands of many is no better than power in the hands of few. If you want to curb abuse, you should expand constitutional protection, not look to expand power to the people. Those people are the same ones that run for office anyway. They run the dirty, corrupt businesses, and they stab people in the back and do crazy things. No, I don't want a mob of people, even regular average Joes, to determine what happens in my life. The Electoral College is a stopgap measure to prevent that from happening and to force the political system to at least pretend to care about people in flyover states, smaller towns on the coast, like here. Like, what politician is going to bother visiting Vermont at all? There are no major metropolitan areas to scrape together in Vermont. If you didn't have an electoral college and a few votes coming from it. Now, in all honesty, most states are so highly partisan, they're not contested significantly anyway. But some of the swing states, like Nevada, is mostly empty space other than Vegas. And yet people go and they shake a few hands in these little towns. Again, New Hampshire and Iowa, two of the most important states of all. There are no major metropolitan areas there. Des Moines is not a major metropolitan area. And what's it over in New Hampshire? I can't even... Manchester. barely even think of it. I live right fucking next door. You know, northern New England is not particularly densely populated and politically important. It's a problem that we happen to suffer with. People care about Maine now because, you know, it had gone far blue for a while. Now it's looking more like a swing state every day. The population there is quickly aging, and the economic problems it's causing are causing people to become fiscally conservative, which is a funny part. No. By the way, somebody earlier, this is totally unrelated, was talking about how I was dressing and how it wasn't a good look for the channel, and I'm like, I've changed up my style like 6 times already, dude. It's not going to happen. I'm going to dress the way that I feel. But no, the majority drools. Direct democracy is just I know that's a cliche term. It's 2 wolves and a sheep having lunch and voting on what they want to eat. That's definitely true. And then they say, as a cap off to that, they say liberty is a well-armed sheep contesting the results of the election. Yeah, okay. We can just use that example, and sort of fits in with it. Elizabeth Ward, do you honestly think that the direct democracy wouldn't immediately be perverted by propaganda anyway? Because, I mean, if it was majority rules and it lowered the power of, you know, supposedly lowered the power of those that are in charge of things, they're not going to want to give up their actual power. They're not going to want to give that up. They're totally corrupt. The only thing standing in the way half the time is some vague constitutional interpretation that after years and years manages to make it to SCOTUS or something. So it's always an interesting time. That's about all. Peace out.